This is the Jaggernaut. It's a race car I built for racing in the 24 Hours of Lemons. It's an 87 Jaguar XJ6 with a 500-inch Cadillac motor in it. The car is completely gutted, and I stripped out the wiring harness from the Jaguar and reused it to rewire the car from scratch. The wiring is currently a bit of a mess. So, in this video I'm going to tell you how to wire a car from scratch. Specifically, one of the problems I have with it right now is I have wires changing color in the middle of the runs. And then we also had some hackery done at the last race we were at in an attempt to get things done in a hurry. And I want to get it all cleaned up and make the harness easy for everyone to understand. I'm going to show you some of the best practices you can use when you're trying to wire up a car from scratch. When you're wiring your race car from scratch, you're going to need some supplies, you're going to need some tools. So I'm going to give you a rundown of things you'll need to do this. First off, you're going to need crimpers. These are just cheapo crimpers. They work fine for this kind of business. You can get the high-dollar professional crimpers. I have a set, but for this is going to be quick and dirty. I'm going to do it with these. Wire stripper. These are absolutely handy for just stripping wires fast when you have to do a bunch. You can use the wire stripper, these down here on your wire stripper or on your wire crimpers, but they take a little while. They're not always as accurate and fast as these are. You're going to need a terminal kit. I've assembled this terminal. This is a bunch of different packages thrown into a little drawer that goes into my wiring toolkit here. Bulk butt connectors. You'll want red and blue ones. You probably need a few yellow ones. You'll want some ring lugs, and you'll want some male and female connectors. And then also for your big battery cables, you want some big lugs. At some point, you're probably going to need a soldering iron. You can do a wiring harness without a soldering iron, but whenever you do splices, a lot of times it makes them more secure. I have talked to some people who don't like using solder on splices. They feel that whenever you splice terminals on, if you add solder to it, it makes a solid link in the wire, and you tend to run into breakage if you have vibration. I disagree. I've never had that problem. On the race car here, all my splices, I took the butt connectors, I peeled the plastic insulation off, crimped them on, and soldered them, put heat shrink over them, and they've held up fine. And I'll show you how to do that later. Electrical tape, pretty much a given. You're always going to go through a certain amount of electrical tape. At some point, you're going to need a wire tester. Just a simple test light like this will let you know where you have power in your circuit and help you diagnose problems. You're going to need lots of zip ties of varying sizes, varying thicknesses. The best place to get these is at that cheapo tool store where everybody loves to go and hates the quality of the tools. You can buy a couple hundred zip ties for under $5. For your bigger wires, you're going to need a crimper to crimp the lugs on. This lug up here requires a crimper of this size to crimp it on. You're never going to crimp this with one of those little crimpers like this. And this one, again, that favorite cheapo tool store, they have this hydraulic crimping tool for not a whole lot of money. You can spend more money taking your wife out on a date than what this tool costs. And it works effectively. You're going to need a lot of bulk wire. This is nowhere near enough. This is just what I have on hand in my toolkit here for doing simple stuff. When I get my wire, I'm going to order it here in the next week or so. I'll film it in all its bag, show that to you. You're going to need a fusible link block. This one's out of an old RX-7. I just have a bunch of the Pacific fuses jammed in there just to show it off. You're going to want some way of connecting all your higher amperage components under the hood. Then you're going to need a smaller fuse block, and on this you're going to have to decide what kind of fuses you want to use. Do you want to use the regular size fuses? Do you want to use the new micro fuses? Or do you want to use the old glass fuses? If you're doing something vintage, by all means use a glass fuse if you have the holder handy. Most of my stuff, I rob parts from my old Japanese cars and get them from the junkyard. I like these size fuses. These are becoming more common, and if I build stuff in the future, I may step into this size fuse. Finally, these are really handy. One of my teammates, Crimping, turned me on to these. You rivet these little plastic connectors in place, and they hold your wiring harness up out of the way with zip ties. You can see I've got that little plastic piece riveted onto the body here, run a zip tie through it, and the harness is held right where you need it. And I'll go into that process here later on in the video. When you're working on rewiring your race car, you have to start with a plan. That means drawing out a wiring diagram or finding one online. I've drawn this one up for the circuits that I'm going to need on this car if I'm going to race it, and also if I want to drive it on the street. So I've got my plan of what color wires I need, or what the circuits are going to need. And I've got a list of all my wire colors that I'll need on the back. And so I placed an order. I found a company called 4rcustoms.com that sells bulk wire, or not necessarily bulk, but they sell striped wire in hobbyist sizes. So I've got my order in, and it's time to check off and see what I got. Now, I ordered a pair of Deutsch connectors for the engine harness. I'd like to be able to switch out engines quicker than the last time I had to do an engine swap. And so part of that is having these connectors handy. Now to check off my wire colors. It's a little breezy here today. I've got 12 gauge wire. I should have 6 colors. Red, yellow, blue, white, green, and gray. Red, yellow, blue, gray, green, and white. So then I should have a blue and white wire. I should have gray and red, gray and green, gray and blue. Gray is my color for my engine circuits. Gray and brown. I try to color code them appropriately. Gray and brown is going to be oil pressure. Gray and blue is going to be coolant temperature. I can't remember what some of these other colors are at the moment. Gray and yellow is going to be my ignition. I've got green and blue and green and red. That's for fuel pump. Yellow and orange. Yellow and red. Yellow and gray. Yellow and white times 2. And yellow and black times 2. Yellow is my lighting. And the white and the black are going all the way back to the tail lights. And then orange and black. And that is for the horn. I really didn't have a color for that circuit. It doesn't fit any of the categories, so I figured orange will work. So everything that I have on this list is here. I'm good to start wiring. So here's my current wiring harness on the Jaguar. As you can see, this isn't real optimal. This is not pulled tight, but it's not very loose. I'd really like to run this up and to here and then down to the engine. And I think that'll give me a little more wiggle room when the engine torques over. Here's the fusible link box that I was telling you about. I'm running Pacific fuses here. This is for my cooling fan. This is the main power for the entire car. And I can run other circuits off here. The lights are going to probably run off. I'm not sure which one. But that's good for your higher amperage circuits. The pass-through there, the factory pass-through is not being used. I do have a stud here for running large amounts of power through the firewall, and I've got the grommet here that I'm running all the wires through. Whenever you run wires through your firewall, you do want a grommet on there. The last thing you want is for your wires to rub raw while you're driving along, maybe have a oil leak or something in the engine bay, and next thing you know you're hitting the fire extinguisher and trying to get out of the car. You don't want shorts. You want everything to run nice. Right now, alternator is not running right. I'm not sure what I've got wrong with the wiring on it, but that's going to be part of the rewires, getting that straightened out. I did have choke hooked up. Somebody else said I didn't need that, disconnected it and adjusted the choke so it doesn't work. I want to get that back in operation. I do intend to drive this thing on the street when I can. The coolant gauge isn't working currently. I do have the overheat switches on each cylinder head hooked up, but I'll include those in the wiring diagram. I hadn't noticed this until just now. Somewhere along the way, the ground wire for this got destroyed. So I'll show you how to make your own terminals and how to install them in this. Okay, first thing you do is take the damaged end of your cable here, nip it off. Get a razor blade and be sure and cut yourself really deeply like I did earlier today so that you bleed all over the place. Or, you know, don't, and then cut the insulation off your end of your wire here. Once you have it stripped back, nice and clean, you want to find some tubing, aluminum or copper. Those are good conductors that this will fit into. It's a little loose in there, not terribly though. This is some aluminum fuel line I bought when I redid the fuel system on the Jaguar a little while back. You want to cut off about that much. You take one end, you're going to mash it. Could put it in a vise and squeeze it, but that'll end up with your flat part centered, and I'd rather have it off to one side so when I bolt it down it's got room for the wire to stick up. Next you're going to get out your drill index and you get that bolt that had this wire bolted down, and you're going to realize that may not work with this bolt. That's about the same thickness as that tube. Let me give a couple more pounds here so I get this little wire. You want to find a drill bit that matches your bolt size. There you go. Brand new terminal, ready to crimp. You want to make sure you get all the wires inside there. And I'm probably going to go ahead and cut that back a little more so I can crimp that further in there. Take a file and clean these edges up a little bit. And if you need to, take a moment to use your hammer and reshape this as need be. I think that makes a pretty nice terminal there. And deburr the back end a little bit. And that looks like it's going to be a very nice fit for our wire. I've got the 2 gauge crimpers in my crimper right now. I'll step up to 4 gauge. I don't think that wire is 2 gauge. And once I have those in there, tighten it up. keep your wire down in there as you're crimping it. Another thing, you don't want to crimp it down as tight as you can go. There's some guys, I've worked in several shops, and there's some guys who are just gorillas. Everything they do, they've got to crimp it down as tight as it'll go, or tighten a bolt down as tight as it'll go. Don't be a gorilla. Do what needs to be done. Call it good. I'm only tightening until I feel it really snug up, and then I'm stopping. I could go a lot tighter. Put that right there. It's snug. It's tight. It's not going anywhere. Now I could radius these corners a little bit, but it's going to the back side of my motor. It's not something where people are going to catch their hands and get bit by it. I'm more worried about these back here for that. So I think that's good. Now if I really wanted to, I could put some heat shrink over it like this end, but this is a ground wire for my motor. I'm not concerned about it. If it was power wire, I would definitely heat shrink it. Now I'd like to show you how to do crimping of your wires. There's a couple different styles of crimping you can use, different varying qualities of crimp. There are different qualities of crimps that you can use. There's different tools depending on what type of crimp you use. Now for general use, these little ring terminals with the PVC coating on them, or the PVC sheath on them, are fine. On a race car they work fine. If you're doing something a little higher quality, you may want to get some other connectors, like some Deutsch connectors or Weatherpaks, or there are some cheaper alternatives out there now. But I'm going to start off with just a simple ring terminal. There's a couple different types of wire strippers. You can get this cheapo kind, or you can get the, this is still a cheapo kind, but it's specifically for wire stripping and doesn't do crimping. But this kind, you have to kind of guess what size, which hole to put this through to get the wire stripped. You can see there I just skinned the wire, didn't get it actually crimped, or didn't get it stripped. Come down too tight, you can actually cut off some of the wires with it. If you get the right size, these are pretty effective. I'd like to do a little cut, then turn a little bit and cut it again, and that gives you a nice good trim of the wire. Twist the end before you crimp. That way it goes through the end of the crimp terminal better. And you can see it's got a thicker section and a thinner section. The thinner section is where your crimp is going to be. So give it a nice firm crimp. Don't gorilla it. If you gorilla it, it may open back up. I like to give a second crimp choked a little shallower, and that way you get two sections of crimp there. Very snug. I've never had one come apart doing it that way. Now, if you want to go a little higher quality, but you want to use the same cheap terminals, you can take a razor blade and cut off the insulation. Be very careful. This is usually how I cut my fingers. Pull the insulation off. Use your wire stripper. Here's the other wire stripper. Boom, done. Those are handy. They're fast. But it's a whole other tool you have to have in your toolbox. Get your heat shrink tubing on before you crimp it. I always forget that and have to go back and cut the terminal off and put a new one on. Use your crimping tool. Again, I like to give a double crimp. Now you can see I've got a nice metal connection there, but it's not insulated. So you take your heat shrink and you're just going to heat it up and get it to melt. You're going to apply a little bit of heat to it. And get it to shrink up. It's ready to bolt in place. That's a little better than just using this. Still not the best quality you can get, but it works. Now for a splice, you can actually get uninsulated butt connectors. I don't have any on hand right now, so I'm going to try and cut my finger again. If you cut too deep, you'll dig down in the metal and you'll never get through it. So you just kind of want to shave it down until you get to the metal and go alongside it, and you end up stripping the insulation off. Now once again, we're going to strip the insulation back. Get that a little deeper in both of these. There we go. Once again, twist the wire. Get your heat shrink tubing ready. Try to find the seam. The seam is vertical now. You want to crimp on the seam. You don't want the seam sideways when you crimp. You can see the seam there, and it's gripping good like that. Slide your insulation on. Crimp it again. Try to keep it in the same plane. There we go. Toasty there. The heat shrink tubing I have, I think, is a little bit thick for that, a little bit big for this wire. But it shows you pretty much how to do it. And that's tight, it's weatherproof, not going to have any problems with that. Now if you really want to go crazy and get it good and solid, put some solder on your connection. Now you can tell the solder is working when it coats what you're doing and soaks into it. You can see the texture of the underlying wire, you know you've got, but it turns all silver, you know you've got a good solder. As I said before, some people really don't like solder on vehicles because of the vibration. I've never had one break though. When you're done soldering, you turn off your torch, scrape that solder off. You can retin it next time. It's not going to hurt anything. Keeps you from having problems with the solder getting old on there. I'm to the point of building my engine wiring harness. I can see the colors I need here for my harness. Gray and green, gray and blue, gray and brown, gray and yellow, green, and then I'm sorry, that's gray, not green. And then I'll need green and red going to the alternator. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is 6 wires. I've got 6-pin connectors, Deutsch connectors. These are a little high dollar, but for what I want to do, I think they'll work perfect. And now I've got to measure out the length of wire I'm going to need to get my wiring to different places on the engine. As I said earlier, I'm going to drop down from this here to the engine and then run my harness around to where it needs to go. So I'm going to take my tape measure. My first wire, my shortest wire, is going to be to my choke, which is right there. So I'm going to need, not easy to do while I hold the camera, but it looks like I'm going to need about 14 inches of wire. My alternator wiring is going to come up here. So if I stretch that out, it's about 25 inches of wire. So 14 to 25 for those. I'm going to have a wire right to here for the coolant temp sensors. That's going to be another 25 inch. There's another coolant temp sensor back there. I'll check on it here in a minute. But I'll get the wires made and I'll start putting them in the connector to show you how to do it. So I've got my wires all trimmed to length. I'm going to start installing them in the Deutsch connector. You can see you've got both ends of the connector there. You've got some locking tabs for them, and you've got the actual pins themselves that will make the connection. So for these connections, you actually want a professional set of pliers. I bought these back when I was a technician. You don't have to buy that brand. You can buy a cheaper brand for sure. But these are kind of tricky. You want to try and find the right crimp that's going to fold the terminals over without destroying everything. I think that one may be a little too big. I'm going to try it. Now if you notice, I'm getting the insulation in to where that second tab will fold over. Nice firm crimp. Beautiful. I picked the right one the first try. That doesn't always happen. And I go to the next size up to crimp the insulation. And it crimped onto the insulation. Didn't do a great job, but it's there. This goes. I think I used the wrong connector, but we'll try it anyways. And there it is. It locks in place inside there. And it's time to move on to the next wire. Alright, I just finished up getting my wires ready to go in the harness, and I realized as I was doing it that the terminals here are made for 16 to 18 gauge wire. Well, my starter wire is 12 gauge. So I cheated a little bit. You can see the back crimp didn't go on the insulation, it went right on the wire, and then I soldered it. Hopefully it won't hurt the circuit to have it running through this connector. But there we go. There's my wiring harness for my engine. Built, ready to install. Once I get it on there, I'll zip tie everything where it needs to go, zip tie it together, and then I'll run a harness on the car itself that will plug directly into it. Now, finally, probably shouldn't put that in there yet. There is this piece here you have to put in to lock all the terminals in place. If you use a different terminal style, you may not have that locking piece. You may have something different. But that's how the Deutsch connectors work. solder out in your soldering torch. Well, that was impressive and effective. Let me pause for a moment and plug in my other soldering iron.